Hello and welcome to a Week 15 edition of the Bleacher Report Fantasy Football Show. My name is Adam Levitan. As always, joined by Mike Leone for the first week of the fantasy football playoffs. If you're watching this show, I presume that you have a team still alive in the playoffs. Otherwise, why would you watch? Leone, welcome to the playoffs. I believe that is Randy Moss jersey you have rocking today. How's it going?
It is Randy Moss. It's one that people will actually know, even though it's a 90s jersey. So couldn't go too off the board.
It's a beautiful thing. On today's show, we're going to hit on the players that we think are set up the best for the fantasy playoffs. Tried to include some names here that maybe aren't so obvious, focusing a lot on matchups and current roles with their teams here. Also, today, we will take as many questions as we possibly can from you, the people in chat. So feel free to drop those in. We'll get to as many as we can. But without further ado, Leone, let's get to our list here. First player, guys who are going to boom in the fantasy playoffs will be Saquon Barkley. Now, if you made it to the playoffs with Barkley, not impossible, but I would say somewhat tough just because there were a lot of first round picks that hit big. There were a lot of landmines for a lot of other people, though. If you didn't step on a landmine in round two, round three, round four, maybe you still got there with Saquon Barkley. And if you did, he now gets home versus Las Vegas, at Washington, at Buffalo. Those are three of the best possible matchups that you could have for your fantasy running back. We have seen, however, Leone really struggle in the yards per carry department for Saquon Barkley this season. Now, there was a fake tush push that went for a 60-yard touchdown run last week that looked really good. Leone, thoughts on Saquon actually turning it on here down the stretch?
Yeah, just took a fake tush push with an obvious holding call that they didn't make, and we're good. We're golden. But no, it is a great matchup for all three playoff weeks for Saquon. This first one against the Raiders, just massive, massive favorites in this game, setting up the game script. Only 13 and a half team total for Las Vegas, 11 and a half point spread. And then the next two matchups against Buffalo, we have them inflating the rush TD rate for the opposition at a really high rate, yards per carry at a high rate. That's kind of how their defense operates, is they want you to run. And then Washington without Jaden Daniels is another game that Saquon's probably going to be playing from in front against a team in our established run DVP tool that is one of the more favorable running back matchups. And I think Saquon himself, there's a lot of talk about the 400 touches coming into this year. I don't think that's really come into play. We've looked at some of the advanced stats, whether it's his speed with the next gen data or some of the missed tackles, forced and elusive rating stuff, and he's been fine. It's this offense having
Yeah.
systemic issues. Jalen Hurts' play, the offensive line, and there are still some concerns with the offensive line injuries, but I'm hoping the matchups will be enough to help him overcome that, and we can see a few more of those, patented long Saquon runs.
Yeah, for sure. And, I think we're going to end up with Landon Dickerson questionable here this week. Lane Johnson probably not back for a little bit. Something to watch there. But yeah, I mean, just the perfect setup for Saquon. Let's go to our number two player who is set to boom in the fantasy playoffs. It's going to be quarterback Brock Purdy. Not only does Purdy have really good matchups here in the playoffs, but the defense is so decimated that the 49ers are going to need Purdy to step on the gas. He also has healthy Jawan Jennings, healthy George Kittle, healthy Christian McCaffrey, healthy Ricky Pearsall. So you can see a lot of ways defense playing bad, Purdy being really efficient, a lot of ways guys dragging him along with really good yak stuff, a lot of ways Brock Purdy can get it done. Starts here with Tennessee and has two really good matchups after that. Leone, thoughts on Brock Purdy down the stretch?
Yeah, all three of these matchups we have as favorable in our DVP tool. None of them individually like absolutely amazing, but a good stretch across all three. The environments are good too. Two of these games are at home. Another one's at Indy in a dome, which is important this time of year. There's going to be other teams that are really dealing with bad weather on the East Coast, and Purdy's going to be pretty isolated from that. You mentioned all the skill players being healthy there. It's also a little bit nice to have a team that just needs to win, right? Like they're
Yeah.
in the thick of the playoff race. They're 9-4. The division isn't even totally out of question here for them with the loss, for the Rams a couple of weeks ago. So I think them playing desperate, having all their guys together is a really good sign for Purdy.
All right. Let's get some questions from chat here. I know everybody has questions, start sits for their team. Mike Hartman 49 says Chris Olave or Jamison Williams. Olave continues to see really good volume. I know it was not great last week, but overall in the season, he's seeing really good volume. Jamison Williams, difficult matchup here against the Rams. I still expect Lions offense to produce. Maybe I'm overly optimistic. I still think Lions offense is going to have a good game here. What do you think, Leone Olave or Jamison Williams?
I like Jamison Williams. It's two completely different game environments. So even though Olave is going to have the higher target share and maybe arguably, the better matchup from an efficiency perspective, this is a game in New Orleans where both teams are set up to run the ball a ton versus this game in LA that has
Yeah.
a game total of 55, way more than anyone else. Detroit's actually underdogs, which could be a good thing for them throwing. So I'm pretty optimistic from a fantasy perspective on the Detroit pass catchers.
All right. Joshua Caps has a difficult question that I'm sure a lot of people have. He says, how are we feeling about Jonathan Taylor? Well, we are feeling that Philip Rivers is likely to be his quarterback. 44-year-old grandfather, Philip Rivers. You are a 13.5 point dog at Seattle, which has been one of the worst possible matchups for the running back position. I do think volume for JT is going to be fine. Like, he's not going to come off the field. Philip Rivers checks down plenty. I think the role is going to be fine. Touchdown opportunities, though, is what concerns me most here, Leone. I think you still have to start JT, though. If you have him, I wouldn't be like excited to be doing it, though.
Yeah, you got to start JT, but the team total is like 14 for the Colts, which is, I mean, just what a bad break to have the best pick in all of fantasy, and then nothing due to him, have him get, knocked down like this. We have him as like a borderline RB1 on the week to show you how much he's fallen instead of a clear top three back. We've got someone like Woody Marks projecting similarly. Now, I would start JT there, make the talent bet. There's a little bit more, uncertainty on the high end. I think they'll use him a lot in screen games. They got to try and manufacture as much offense as they can, but ultimately, guys like Saquon, James Cook, even Derrick Henry, they're all going to project better than JT, despite JT having the better year.
Let's go to T-Belt. He says Quinshon Judkins or Travis Etienne. Jaguars offense, I mean, people are kind of sleeping, and I was ready to throw in the towel on Trevor Lawrence, just like not good enough to support a really good offense. He has been very good over the last month, has Trevor Lawrence. And also last week, we saw Bashal Tutin get banged up a little bit. He was fine, though, and he still only played 2 snaps due to some mistakes that he made on the field. So, yeah, Judkins' efficiency has been a problem also here, Leone. What do you think, Judkins or Travis Etienne?
Think they're both good starts. I'd probably side with ETN. Just this team seems to be rolling a bit more, but this game in Cleveland is set up again for be very run heavy for Cleveland. The Chicago run defense has been really bad all season long, so I do think it's a pretty good spot for Judkins. We have them projected very similarly around 15 to 16 fantasy points.
Yeah, and by the way, Dylan Sampson not practicing again today, and Jerome Ford got banged up. So stay tuned to the injury report there on Brown's running back before making a decision. You know what? For this next one, we'll lead it in. Josh Capps said Jordan Addison or Scary Terry, which brings me back to our number 3 pick here on players who will break out. Our number 3 guy on the list is Terry McLaurin. Josh Caps. And I think Copilot had some data here also, Leone, but I think that Terry McLaurin has looked extremely healthy and kind of fresh and bouncy since he's been back. And, when guys don't play for most of the season, it's an edge to be fresh and bouncy at this time of the year. So I understand Marcus Mariota starting this game. It would still be McLaurin for me. Leone, any more thoughts here on McLaurin rest of season?
Yeah, I mean, we asked the co-pilot just generically what team has the best fantasy matchup for the fantasy playoffs. And at the wide receiver position, co-pilot identified the Washington Commanders as having the best fantasy matchup for the wide receiver position specifically. And if you take a look at their schedule, it kind of lines up for us. You mentioned the target share there for McLaurin has come up really high since he's come back from injury. That was kind of one of the main concerns coming into the year was he'd be a low 20% target share guy. He's got in the mid to upper 20s. And as far as this schedule goes, you get a game against Dallas. Those games have tended to be a little bit more shootout oriented. We have that as the second most favorable matchup from the fantasy point perspective at the wide receiver position. Also, matchups against Philly, which they're probably going to be throwing from behind, and then against the Giants, which is our third most favorable. So you get two really good efficiency matchups, and then you get one where the volume against Philly hopefully makes up for some efficiency concerns.
Number 4 on our list for the playoffs is a little bit of a thinner one. This is a guy who only ran about 60% of the routes last week, but I think there is room for it to grow from there. It is Darren Waller. And the main reason I wanted to bring this up is just for schedule. Week 16, the Dolphins get the best possible matchup for a tight end at home against the Bengals. And then week 17, I consider it also one of the best possible matchups for a tight end in the Tampa Bay Bucks. And both those games are at home. Darren Waller also has a really good red zone role. So it's thin. Once you get past like tight end 5 or tight end 6, it's all going to be thin. And so if you're streaming a tight end, I think Darren Waller is at least worth looking at. Leone, any thoughts on Waller's role here rest of season?
Yeah, I like it. Even if he's not playing a ton of snaps, I think the productivity per snap is going to be strong. His efficiency has been great. They've designed some really sharp plays for him in the green zone to get him good opportunities for touchdowns. And for some more context on that, amazing matchup against the Bengals in week 16. In our DVP tool, Establish Your Run, it's kind of meant to be predictive. So it says, what percentage increase would you get a player if they play this defense, based on what they've done adjusted for schedule. And none of it's more than like a 10% boost because it's just so noisy. The Bengals we have at a 17% boost to tight ends, which is just outrageous. The next highest at the tight end position is the Colts at 5%. So, and this is something that has been going back for a couple of years now. It's just the way they play schematically. So, just an absolutely insane matchup for Waller.
Indeed, it is. All right. Let's get back to the chat here. We'll do some rapid fires. I know everybody has a lot of start sits here for the playoff week. Adam W said, should I drop Chris Rodriguez or Monangai for Manuel Wilson? I have Jacobs as my RB1. Yeah, important strategy note. You have to have the good handcuffs. And I would consider Emmanuel Wilson a good handcuff to Josh Jacobs. Who should he drop? Chris Rodriguez or Monangai? That's a little bit tougher. I think they're both interesting plays here this week. I think Monangai is just systemically, as part of their team, is probably a little better. So I might drop Chris Rodriguez, although I do kind of like him this week. Leone, any thoughts on that? Who would you drop, C-Rod or Monangai?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I think I would drop Rodriguez just because I have more concerns over the Washington offense in
Yep.
general. I know the matchup this week against the Giants is amazing, and that kind of keeps them close. But I'd rather be holding Manon guy for the rest of the playoffs. And there's some chances that he'd be an amazing or at least really strong start if something happened to Swift. Rodriguez doesn't really have anything that could make him a really, really strong start.
Yep, agreed. Pizos says flex spot, Travion Henderson, Chris Olave, or Tedero McMillan. Those are three pretty good options here. We are going to see Patriots come out of their bye and I think go back to that kind of 50-50 split between Ramondre and Travion Henderson. Leone, any thoughts on this one? Who to start, Travion, Olave, or T-Mac?
We've got it pretty close. I give a slight lean to T-Mac here. Just think, young ascending player over the fantasy playoffs. You kind of want to buy into that upside. We've also seen two of Bryce Young's best starts of the entire year and, two of the better starts of his entire career come over the last 3 games. He had 2 games with over 10 yards per attempt. That's something that he very rarely had done before. So, some chance he's figured things out and gets they're both playing in a dome, but it's a bigger relative boost to T-Mac, who generally isn't playing, his home games in a dome.
Earn Mike K24 says Darren Waller or Dalton Kincaid this week. Well, we just talked about Waller. Kincaid came back last week for the best possible matchup. Didn't play a full complement, but he never plays a full complement. I thought Kincaid actually looked reasonably healthy. I was worried that he wouldn't at all here. Any thoughts on this one, Leone, Kincaid or Waller?
I do like Kincaid. I think, even though we like the efficiency upside for Waller, ultimately, Kincaid's been one of the most efficient, tight ends in the NFL this season, and he's going to get a bit more volume.
E-Money says, would you flex Michael Wilson versus Houston or Tracy / Singletary versus Commanders? That's going to come down to, is Tyrone Tracy able to play. I think he is, in which case they would be a split there against the Commanders. I would probably go, I know it's a difficult matchup. I would probably still go Michael Wilson, assuming Marv is out. Leone, any thoughts there?
If it's full PPR, I think you got to go with Michael Wilson. Also, assuming Marv is out, his expected fantasy points in those games with Brissett just insane. It's a really tough matchup. A little bit worried about the efficiency of the offense, but it's going to lead to another game with a 70% or so pass rate for Arizona, and he's the number one wide receiver there. Obviously, McBride, top pass catcher, but at the receiver position, it's going to be Michael Wilson.
All right, two more before we get back to our list here. Aaron Mike Hay is back. He says Mariota or McCarthy. I know my gut is Mariota. Good matchup and can run. McCarthy can get you like five. I know people are excited about what McCarthy did last week. He still only threw for like 160 yards. He just ran hot on touchdowns, which is fine. Good to see. But yeah, any thoughts there, Leone?
We've got Mariota here, a bit more rushing. I mean, they both run, but a little bit more rushing floor. And I mean, McCarthy, I think, didn't even hit 20 fantasy points with the three touchdowns last week. I know it's another great matchup for him, but yeah, I think Mariota's got more upside.
Last one before we get back to the chat here. Not Serp says Shadur Sanders or Drake May. I mean, one guy is maybe the MVP of the entire league. The other one plays for the Browns. And yes, had a very good game last week, but it did come against the Titans. So I don't think this one is particularly close, Leone. It's going to be Drake May here for me.
Yeah, I would note on Shador, he's flashed some upside, which is great, but I do expect them to be a lot more run heavy than they were last week.
All right, let's get back to our list for the last two names here. Players that could boom in the fantasy playoffs. Let's go to the tight end position and a thin tight end position. I just talked about how at tight end it does not take a lot to be a good streamer. And, when you play the Bengals, you're going to project well. Isaiah Likely got robbed of a touchdown last week. Also, remember on Thanksgiving against the Bengals, Likely was going in for a touchdown and he dropped the ball at the 1 inch line. I think he's ahead of Mark Andrews now. Like, in terms of pass catching, and Mark Andrews has the red zone role. I think Mark Andrews is way more likely to score a touchdown, but likely to have like a big game. I would bet on likely to do that above Andrews. So you get the really good spot here. You also get to play the Patriots and the Packers, who have just been okay against tight ends later. Leone, any more thoughts on Ravens passing offense here heading into the playoffs?
Yeah, if you're a tight end that played the Bengals one of these playoff weeks, there was a 50-50 shot. You made it onto the list. Likely gets there, as you said, with the ascending role. He's had an 18% and 19% target share the last 2 weeks. Last four games altogether, 16% target share, way above the seasonal rate of 11%. So the role seems to be growing for him.
All right. And the last guy on our list is Devin Neal. We finally saw Devin Neal put it together and have a pretty nice game here last week against the Bucks. The thing for me is he does it all kinds of ways. I mean, he's their red zone back. He's also their passing back, and he's their base back. So he plays the Panthers, he plays the Jets, and he plays the Titans. Those are games that the Saints can stick around in. I mean, no one's going to blow the doors off the Saints, not the Panthers, Jets, and Titans. And so I think it sets up pretty well for the Saints to get a decent amount of plays off and be somewhat efficient here on offense. And when we're scraping kind of the bottom of RB2 type of stuff, that's where I think Devin Neal can win. Leone, kind of unimpressive, I think, from a talent perspective, what I've seen so far in Devin Neal, but role has been really strong. Any more thoughts on him?
Yeah, the game that Alvin Kamara got hurt, Taysom Hill had a 42% uh, carry share for them of the designed runs. With weeks to prepare, he's only had a 5%, 7% share. Devin Neal got a goal line rushing touchdown. That was one of my main concerns. Was like, would Taysom Hill take all those? So it's back-to-back weeks of over a 60% rush share for Neal. And you mentioned he does a little bit of everything. His route shares the last 3 weeks, 69%, 73%, 63%. Those are huge totals for a running back. So just by the nature of his workload, he's going to be a solid start most weeks.
All right. We got about 5 to 10 more minutes here. We'll get to as many of your questions as we can. Eric says Isaiah Likely, who we just talked about, or Colson Loveland. Even with Roma Dunze out last week, the Bears only raised their two tight end set rate barely, like 5%. And Colson Loveland did catch a touchdown, but also ran one fewer route than Cole Kmet. So the Roma Dunze thing didn't really change anything here for Loveland, in my opinion. He's still going to be a part-time player. So will Isaiah Likely. Any thoughts on this one, Leone? Likely or Loveland?
We have it projected really, really close. I'm going to go with likely because I think that matchup between Cincinnati and Chicago could be extremely run
Yeah.
heavy, and there's a chance that our projections aren't even fully accounting for just how crazy the DVP stuff against Cincinnati has been for tight ends.
Adam Eskert says Juwan Jennings or DK Metcalf. Steelers came out last week with a shockingly throw heavy game plan. That was the most throw heavy I've seen the Steelers all year. And DK Metcalf benefited from that. When you're dealing with Arthur Smith, I'm hesitant to say that's going to be like sticky again. Obviously, Juwan Jennings has a very good matchup here this week against Tennessee. What do you think there, Leone Jennings or DK Metcalf?
I'm going to go with Metcalf. His last four games has a target share of 28%. You mentioned the increased throw rate for them. I prefer that a little bit more to Jennings with San Francisco potentially dominating this game against Tennessee that could just reduce the overall pass volume.
Silent Granite says Zay Flowers or Jawan Jennings. Saw Zay Flowers come alive in the second half and Lamar get going. Very good matchup again here for Zay Flowers. Although Bengals, the only thing they've done well on defense really is they've done okay on number one wide receivers. That's like it. That's the only thing that they've done okay. But yeah, what do you think there, Leone? Zay or Jawan?
I still probably go Zay, with the the Ravens playing pretty desperate here. We've seen them throwing a bit more, and I just think he's extremely talented. And one of these games, he's going to run a little bit hotter on touchdowns.
Adam says, who should I flex in full point PPR? Devin Neal or Emeka Egbuka? Yeah, we haven't gotten to the Mike Evans stuff here today, but Mike Evans is expected back for the game tonight. I do not think he's going to play full complement of snaps, but where he wins in the red zone, third downs, a lot of those spots are where you want your receiver to be the alpha, and I don't think Emeka Egbuka will be the alpha in that spot tonight. That said, I think it's probably pretty close here. What do you think, Leone Devin Neal or Emeka Egbuka?
Yeah, we have it really close. I think if you're going for floor, I'd just take the running back workload. But for ceiling, we did see the efficiency for Buka be a little bit better when Evans was out there earlier in the season, maybe getting a little bit less attention, and that could help offset some of the volume that he's going to lose with Evans back. So I would go Igbuka if you're an underdog or full PPR format.
In the future, says Harold Fannin or Travis Kelsey. Harold Fannin with Shador Sanders has been very, very good. And Shador has been better than Dylan Gabriel or, Brown's era, Deshaun Watson. So I'm tempted to just roll Fannin the rest of the season, man. I mean, he looks like one of the best young tight ends in the entire league. What do you think, Leone Kelsey or Fannin?
I'm with you. I'm going with Fannin, the young ascending player. Shador's been able to kind of prop up these receivers from a fantasy perspective.
MROP says Devin Neal, Kareem Hunt, or Zach Charbonnet. Yeah, just on raw touches, I think that's almost certainly Devin Neal. Yeah, Zach Charbonnet is always a good bet to score a touchdown. And Kareem Hunt, honestly, is a pretty good bet to score a touchdown also. But who can get 20 touches? I think that's Devin Neal. What do you think, Leone Neal, Hunt, or Charbonnet?
Neal for me.
Stay Chiseled says John Mechie or Jerry Judy. Oh, this is the kind of deep stuff that, oh, man. You know, you're asking about Leone's boy. I don't know if you guys know. Jerry Judy is Leone's close personal friend. When no one else on earth wants to play Jerry Judy in DFS, Leone enters a $5,000 buy-in entry and plays Jerry Judy. So that before Leone answers, I just want to put that out there for the people. Mechie or Judy this week?
You left out the part where I proceed to lose the $5,000 playing. I'll go Mechie. The target shares have been really consistent for him. Three straight games with at least a 24% target share.
Yeah, I will say they might have to go Brady Cook, and if they do end up going Brady Cook in this game, like I might go Judy. So yeah. David Kurya says Kyle Pitts or Judy, Stevenson or Evans. I'm not sure if he's asking for one out of these or not. I would say that my favorite out of them, it would, oh, God, you're coming up with another one of Leone's favorite guys, Kyle Pitts.
Pitts versus Judy. I mean, they're putting me in Schrodinger's box here. There's one version of me that picks Pitts and one version of me that picks Judy.
I never click either of these guys, and Kyle Pitts has actually been doing it to me lately. I mean, badly, but
Pitts over Judy, Evans over Stevenson
yeah, I
for
think
me.
so too. Azin
Steven, I don't know. The Stevenson one's close, but sorry, go ahead.
Azin Your Eyes says, full PPR, who would you start in flex? McLaurin, Judkins, Kyron, or Walker? My God.
Wow.
Um, Kyron's going to go series by series with Corum. That's just the way that they are doing it. The Walker stuff, man, it's such a great spot for him. He's been so bad. I half think we have to at least be somewhat concerned that Charbonnet's role expands. I mean, Walker has been so inefficient lately since he's kind of assumed the role that how could they not be like, well, we tried it with Walker, but maybe we go back a little bit to Charbonnet. So yeah, I'm curious on your take there, Leone, and any thoughts on this one.
I mean, I would start one of these running backs. I think they're all really strong starts that I would take them over Terry. We have them projected like between 14 and 15 full PPR points, extremely close. I'm tempted to go Kyron. Sometimes in these bigger games, he has a little bit more a share of the workload. He's the one that will play more of the pass catching role. So I'd slightly go Kyron here. I'd probably have it Kyron, Judkins, then Walker.
Okay. IX says, do I start Mooney, Quentin Johnston, or Jaden Reed? I don't think you can start Mooney. I know it's a great spot, but they're running stuff to like David Sills and Kyle Pitts, and Mooney is just like a deep threat. He might catch one tonight. That's like,
In terms of per route efficiency.
all right, we'll bang out these last five as fast as we can. Jaden Higgins or Alec Pierce. Going to be really tough to click Alec Pierce with Phil Rivers under center. I think. Wiggins, what do you think? Leone, what do you think? Higgins or Pierce?
I'll go Higgins.
Zach says Lad McConkey, Jawan Jennings, or Mike Evans. I mean, Evans coming off this injury, Lad is certainly more talented, I think, than Jawan Jennings. The role on Lad has not been great, especially with this hand stuff going on with Herbert. What do you think there, Leone? Lad, Jennings, or Mike Evans?
That's tough. Our projections do kind of clearly favor Jennings of that group, though, and
Okay.
I'll side with that.
Court Analyzer says Goddard, Hawkinson, or Andrews. Crazy. I have all three on the same team. I can't believe you guys are carrying three tight ends. I thought Goddard looked great on Monday night. That would be the pick there for me. What do you think, Leone?
I'd go Andrews. The route share is stuck, even with likely getting more attention, and just want to play into this matchup.
Brew says Brenton Strange or Isaiah Likely. Just on matchup, I think it's hard to play Strange over Likely there, but what do you think?
Strange has been pretty solid. I think I'll go
Yeah.
Strange here.
Okay. Gnarly J30 for our last question says, who should I start? Ferguson or Fannin? Oh, difficult matchup for the Cowboys. I kind of think that their pass game is somewhat matchup proof. Like they are so good and can do so many different things. I like their pass game still, even against Minnesota here. But yeah, what do you think, Leone Ferguson or Fannin?
I'm gonna go Fannin. Is CD good to go?
I think CD's going to play, yes.
Okay, so yeah, I'll go Fannin then.
All right, I lied. Last one from Wed Embos says Egbuka, Pearsall, or Jordan Addison. I think that's going to be Egbuka for me there. Pearsall, you're dealing with really rough target shares since everybody's been healthy. And Addison's obviously dealing with McCarthy. What do you think there, Leone?
Yeah, I would go Igbuka first, Addison second, Pearsall third.
All right. Thanks for all the questions. Huge good luck to anybody still in their playoffs. Let's recap our list here. Players we think could boom over the next 3 weeks. Saquon Barkley, really, really soft schedule. Looks as explosive as ever, just needs space. Brock Purdy, everybody's healthy. Defense is injured and terrible. Really good matches for him as well. Terry McLaurin, fresh and good matchups. Darren Waller gets to play the Bengals and the Bucks in week 16 and 17. Isaiah Likely has a game this week against the Bengals, and his role is rising. And Devin Neal, as a guy who can get 15 to 20 touches, and has three really good matchups here that the Saints actually have three chances to win 3 games down the stretch. Jets, Panthers included there. All right. That is going to do it for a Week 15 edition of the Bleacher Report Fantasy Football Show. Appreciate everyone being here and hanging out. For Leone, for everyone behind the scenes at ETR, everyone behind the scenes at Bleacher Report, I am Adam. Good luck. everybody.